Welcome back. President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered his much-anticipated State of the Nation address outlining government's plans for the year ahead. Among the key topics addressed were infrastructure developments and road safety, areas that directly impact South Africans every day. Today we are joined by the CEO of the South African National Roads Agency, SANRAL, Reginald Demana, to discuss the government's approach to these critical issues and how SANRAL plans to tackle the challenges ahead. A very good morning to you, Reginald. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Let's start off with your overall reaction to what the President said during his State of the Nation address.
As at large, our reaction as SANRAL, we're quite impressed by the President's focus on economy. He indicated that for us to create that virtual cycle of investment, growth and jobs, we need to lift economic growth to above 3%. And in order to do that, we have to put in a massive investment in infrastructure. The President indicated that government will spend about 940 billion over the next 3 years. 375 billion will be by state-owned entities, including SANRAL. So that's 40% of that total investment will be led by SOEs. And that investment will be going to key infrastructure such as roads, bridges, dams, waterways, ports, airports and railways, including of course, power in the form of renewable energy and others. So he is quite consistent, similar to what he indicated in the economic recovery and reconstruction plan when we came out of COVID. So that consistency comes through an economic growth led by investment in infrastructure. Of course, he also announced that the medium-term development plan has been adopted by the Government of National Unity. So that's the 5-year plan with key strategic priorities being you want to really drive inclusive economic growth that creates jobs. You also want to reduce poverty and tackling the high cost of living. And lastly, creating that ethical, capable and developmental state.
Yeah, and I think important to also attracting the investment that is required for the infrastructure that needs to be built and the infrastructure that is required in the country so that we see all of the cranes going up and we see all the jobs being created, is the fear of, as an example, the so-called construction mafia. And the SANRAL itself has had some run-ins with the construction mafia. The President spoke about building the biggest, what will become the highest bridge in the country near Lusiki, in the continent rather, near Lusiki. But that construction as well has been impacted by the so-called construction mafia. I didn't hear much emphasis around that. But from your perspective, how do we then deal with that situation?
Well, I think the President in his State of the Nation address has to lift very key macro policy issues. Ministers and other portfolios will then have to deal with issues that affect their portfolio in infrastructure. At SANRAL, we recognize all stakeholders, that we have to engage with in order to enable the building of infrastructure. Whatever they are called, we engage with them. We engage with our communities. That is why we focus very much on what we call the contractor participation programs or participation goals, CPG, where 30% of an investment in a particular project has to mobilize local communities, stakeholders, create local jobs, as well as support SMMEs in a particular area. It gives people a sense of ownership. They then tend to protect the project because it is creating value in their own livelihood. And that is how we manage the various stakeholders and the various dynamics. So really, for me, key thing will be, how do we continue to build infrastructure, making sure that all different stakeholders in a particular area feel a sense of ownership, can see the value flowing through to themselves.
Yeah, but surely, and I know that you say that the ministers would have to respond to this. But when we're speaking about investor confidence, this directly speaks to what the president is trying to get, to spur investors on to invest in our country, or the local investors to invest in local projects. But if you have about 5.7 billion rand that is spent on the South African army to go and protect the construction work that is taking place because of the construction mafia, and here again it is the commander-in-chief who is in charge of the army, surely there's a major issue that we are dealing with here, which the president, I believe, should have addressed.
Well, I think we can agree to leave that the speechwriters. For me, the focus will be that indeed the president touched on key macro issues of attracting investment and where that investment must go, which is infrastructure. Infrastructure tends to then mobilize other investments in any particular areas. For us, the road you are talking about, for example, in the Wild Coast, it is one of the most important projects which we believe will mobilize investment in the Pondoland, in the Eastern Cape, will also lead to much needed development along that coastal side, in the same way that the N2 has done on the side of KZN, as well as on the side of Western Cape alongside the Garden Road. And that's what we want to focus on.
Okay. The president also then speaks about getting the private sector, and we know that this has been an idea that has been mooted, waiting for it to finally materialize, and that is the private sector using our rail network as well, which would then mean that you would find more of what is now currently on the roads with the trucks and the impact that it's having on our roads being moved onto the rail. What's your reaction to that? But can you also speak to us about how the failure of a Transnet to deal with the logistical challenges have had an impact on SANRAL's own projects, including the roads and the quality of those roads?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is we often refer to that as the road to rail migration, so that whatever rail-friendly cargo must move towards rail. And indeed, the president indicated yesterday that Transnet performance has stabilized. We are starting to see green shoots. If you listen to those who look at the coal line, Richardsburg coal line that does export coal, they will tell you that after many years, they have now seen improvement in the volumes that are moving. So that's very positive. There's also been an adoption of the logistics roadmap, the network statement, which will allow hopefully certain lines to be concessioned. Concessions or allowing private sector to run certain infrastructure is not new. At SANRAL, we have 3 concessions running some of our busiest parts of the national roads. So it's not something new in the Department of Transport. I must also, of course, say that within SANRAL, we handle probably 60 to 70% of freight. So that's mainly your truck cargo on the roads. It has increased over time, given the inefficiencies in rail, but I think we are starting to turn the corner. Obviously, with more trucks, there will be a certain level of increased maintenance that you do. But most importantly, we must not lose focus as a country. We better have the economy moving, whichever way it is moving, whether it's rail or road, as long as things are moving and we are fixing where we need to fix to get efficiencies.
Yeah. In conclusion, is SANRAL having any conversations at all with SALGA to say that where SANRAL, with its expertise, can assist local government in terms of ensuring that there are roads that are built, but the roads themselves are also maintained, and doing that, all of that within cost, because that has been a major issue as well that has been addressed?
Yes, certainly. And I must also indicate that the G20 presidency by South Africa has also led us to have more discussions with SALGA, in particular related to how do we assist in fixing some of the roads, in particular towns and cities which are earmarked to host meetings between airports, between venues where people will be staying, and convention centers. And obviously, what we are looking forward to is an increased collaboration and scope. Lastly, SANRAL has now opened provincial offices. We are busy identifying locations where those offices will be in various provinces, such that we will have provincial representation. That takes us closer to municipalities, and we will then be having conversations through SALGA and the Department of Transport on how best we can capacitate municipalities, extend services, whether it's advisory or otherwise. At least we'll be able to help being much closer to such provinces and municipalities.
Yeah, and I wonder what your previous experience is around this, Reginald, considering again that you have more and more, even from a provincial level at least, provinces rather saying that let's issue the contract to SANRAL and SANRAL will then deal with the subcontracting. Do you think that that approach has led to some windfalls, and including, for instance, some low-hanging fruit, where again projects are being done within cost and within time, the deadline?
Yeah, the model involves really we enter into a memorandum of understandings. We will then be the implementing agency for certain projects. We will get contractors in to execute the work together with us on behalf of municipality or provinces. So that has certainly yielded benefits in areas where such collaborations have been seen. You will also see that a couple of provinces have also transferred some of their roads to SANRAL. Last year, I think we did about 2,500 kilometers transferred to SANRAL, and that's about 10% of SANRAL's network that has been transferred recently. Again, by transferring such key roads to SANRAL, it means we are then able to look after them, being in our balance sheet ourselves. We then go out and mobilize resources from National Treasury to look after that network. So it's a combination. Roads can be transferred, or there can be MOUs where we collaborate to assist with bringing expertise and project management skills.